Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
So Eric, you've led many sales teams, and over time, you've taken over some, you've led some, so you've seen the good and the bad in different sales forces. Talk a little bit about some of the qualities of the top performing sales teams, and then we'll also maybe talk a little bit about their culture of some of the productive sales teams.
Yeah, so the top performers are always focused. And that sounds so obvious, but lots of sales teams aren't focused on what they sell, focused on what their weekly metrics are supposed to be, their monthly metrics, quarterly metrics, and really focused just around what does success look like. So many teams get out there and we use that term unconsciously competent. So many teams are really unconsciously competent. And when you find the one team, I remember acquiring a company back at RSA, and many of these guys because both of you gents have mentored many of these sellers. But boy, they were laser focused. They had their metrics, they had their process, they knew what good looked like, and they knew where to spend their time and where not to spend their time. And when you come from an organization that perhaps isn't that focused, and then suddenly you look at one that is, it's a stark contrast.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what really hit me in all the things you said. There's a number of them, but the one that really hit me the hardest was knowing where to spend your time and where not to spend your time. I know that goes to focus, but talk a little bit about some of the things that the productive teams spend their time on versus not spending their time on.
Well, this is where I think that the old measure twice, cut once approach to sales management is really important, because in order to know how to qualify out, we've got to know what success is and what makes our deployments and our sales processes work really, really well. And there's some obvious ones that work in any sales cycle. Right? We got to get to budget, and we've got to understand time frame and pain and all of that stuff. But there are nuances, and the nuances really, really matter. So I think that, as we look at qualifying out, we've got to understand a lot more about the ideal company profile and then the ideal contact themselves. So the human and the persona profile. And that's something that in my earlier years, I think I just took for granted, back to that unconscious competence thing. And I didn't really spend nearly enough time thinking about the role of the human. I thought, if you get to an exec, I've been in cyber a long time. So if you get to the CISO, you're good. Well, maybe. And that's a pretty safe bet. If you're going to bet on one persona, that's a good one. But there's lots of
Especially if you're selling security.
But there are a lot of different scopes of CISO. Sometimes the CISO doesn't own what you're selling. We sell a platform today that CISO sometimes owns, but generally doesn't own exclusively. So they may not be able to ubiquitously just make a decision. They're often just a key stakeholder in a platform, and they may not own the whole thing. So that level of understanding of the role of the persona and how they fit into the company, because different industries, it works differently as well. I don't think I appreciated that fully for many years.
I think a lot of people, to your point, they'll actually figure out their ideal customer profile and who that persona is. But to your point, they never really dig deep on the profile of the persona themselves.
Yeah.
That's really important. I mean, we're dealing with humans, and you have to really understand what drives that person. We know how they're measured typically, but we never go any deeper than that.
Yeah. What are some of the things you guys would expect to see in that profile of the persona?
Well, these days, I think it's more about trying to understand who the person is than expecting things. Like these days, it's so easy to Google, especially a C-level person who's probably talking on panels, probably has maybe done some blogs, and trying to and checking their LinkedIn industry organizations that they join, you can start to put a little bit of a profile together of who that person is and what excites them and what doesn't excite them. Can start to make some sort of judgments, at least.
I think a ping for that later is just some of the tooling that's available to us that wasn't available even 10 years ago. But yeah, I agree with that a lot. And Cap, when you asked that question, I'm assuming you're going into you're thinking of some of the med pick and some of the criteria around how are we helping to understand what role this person really does play.
Well, I like both things that you guys have hit on, because I want you to go there. And then I want you to follow up on John's point of just, there is a work persona and a role persona. And there are certain value drivers and things like that, Eric, that I'd like you to comment on. But then also with the technology that we have today and the access to information, we can even go deeper into the human persona of the individual, which is what you and Johnny were both talking about. Bring those two worlds together for us, Eric. You started it with, hey, early on in my career, I didn't really think about the persona, the profile. Talk about how that's evolved for you.
Yeah, well, I think I have to take another half step back to give that one real context. And, I learned a lot of this stuff from you gents around sales process and steps in the process and the relationship between the messaging, the sales process, the qualification methodology, the forecasting methodology, and how you bring all those components together. It's a lot more technical than just meets the eye. But I don't think I appreciated sort of the nooks and crannies as much in my earlier days as you do until you build it yourself. And so the reason I share that is, as a seller, if I could get meetings, I'd just keep pulling the thread and I'd get around and I'd network and I could figure out how to just get a deal done. I don't know that I could necessarily teach it too well, but I could do it pretty well. And then all of a sudden you get given a budget and a whole bunch of headcount and you say, yeah, and oh, by the way, by June, you need to sell X. And you're like, oh, well, okay. So how do I get everybody else doing what I thought I was pretty good at myself? And that's where the appreciation of the importance of understanding all these nuances come to be. So, it's not enough just to say you need a champion. And I think now, again, you gents have done an amazing job at training us on what does that mean? What are the definitions? Cap, do I have to ask you, the 3 definitions of a champion, 3 attributes?
I do, brother. I do. Do you want to hear them?
Yeah, well, now I'm sure.
Eric already knows, and he took you training so many times.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Eric, you said that you had been through it 7 times, but I want to just validate that a little bit, because I think it's as old as dirt. Power and influence, actively selling on your behalf, and they have a vested interest in your success is like just table stakes. But I love the conversation in the sense that you're talking about different lenses here. You're talking about individual contributor moving to a role that needs to leverage multiple Erics, meaning you have to leverage yourself in through others. And so you've got to be able to be consciously competent on a persona profile with things like, and I believe companies owe this to salespeople. They owe it to a company. It's a company's responsibility to come up with this information. The ideal customer profile, what does that look like? What type of company and what type of segment, what type of, that we talk about that a lot. The ideal persona profile that would have these types of problems and challenges, that would have these types of negative consequences of not dealing with those problems, that would have these types of business outcomes they're trying to achieve, which is awesome. And then the next lens that you guys kind of touched on a little bit is the most elite people. They consume, they devour that information that the company gives them about how to be best prepared to speak to an individual based upon their persona. And then they utilize what God gave us is this human component of understanding how, what makes that person a human being, what about them is different in their humanity than others that they would come across. And I think that's the most elite people I've ever seen, are the ones that put those two together. They consume what the company provides them as a profile with these types of problems, these types of challenges, therefore these types of expectations. And then they invest the time and they invest their intellect and curiosity into finding out what makes that individual different from a humanistic standpoint. And
yeah, well, you think about like when we all first started selling, you didn't really know much about the persona you were selling to until you were actually in that room with the person, and then maybe found out, you saw some pictures, you saw some things hanging on the wall. They got a football or a hockey stick hanging from the wall. And then you started asking questions, trying to get more personal with the person. These days, you can do so much more homework and even, look all throughout Google, and you can find out so much more about that person and what drives them and their backgrounds. It's all
in the old days, Johnny,
sitting there for you.
In the old days, some of the best advice I ever got one time was from a great leader that I work for, who said, if it's been in print, you should expect that they expect that you've read it. And that's when we're talking about print. Now I'm talking about digital. If it's out there in the digital world, somebody would expect that you would know that about them. And so I love what we're talking about, because that, Johnny, I just want to be clear on what we're talking about. There's two aspects of persona that we're talking about here.
Yes.
There is a company influenced, Eric, I'd like you to talk about that. A company influenced ideal persona, who is the best for our ideal customer profile, who is the best fit for the problems and challenges that we solve, who's the best fit for how we solve that, how we solve it differently and better, and where we've kind of done it before. That's kind of table stakes. This next elevation is kind of going back to how we were all raised, when people said, get to know the individuals as best you can and be intellectually curious about that individual. And that's as old as dirt. That's human behavior. Bring those two concepts together for us, buddy, so people, our listeners, can say, okay, well, what actually am I responsible for today?
Yeah, and this is art and science, right? The two coming together, because just take going to a trade show. I just got back from a big one in the financial services space, and as you're going in, to your points, so much about the folks that you're trying to go see. You know what their companies are struggling with. You know what their history has been. What roles? How did they get into the role that they're in? If you're in the risk and compliance space, did you get there because you came out of financial, somewhere in the CFO's office? Did you come out of internal audit? Did you come out of cybersecurity? Well, you need to know that. Those are three very different thought processes and backgrounds that you're going to use as you approach whatever your discovery and value prop discussions are going to be. And, you couple that with you got to earn the right to get to that personal discussion. So if I want to know your motivations, that can't be my first conversation, or at least my opener. So, let's get personal.
You haven't built any trust yet.
And so the best way to build a trust is what you guys are talking about here. It's low-hanging fruit. It's right in front of you. They've written blogs. They've liked other people's comments. They've made comments on other people's comments. You can come in with all kinds of social media understanding of that person that should shortcut a lot of, or at least help you avoid missteps that don't resonate. So I like to keep it simple, because you can't, there's only so much time, and, going to this trade show, I got a list of 35 folks that I want to go meet. So how much can I actually do for those? But then that also comes back to tech, and you can get your dossiers compiled pretty quickly with some AI tech today, which makes it much easier to go in. And oh, by the way, I also don't have to have my manual sheets of paper I'm flipping through. I've got everything already loaded on my phone, a quick scan of the eye, and I know exactly I'm refreshed. And so, you're not getting confused between 35 different folks. So there's a lot of that comes together here.
Yeah.
And you said something that I really appreciate. You said earn the right. And I want everybody to hear that, because earn the right to have a personal discussion with somebody is different than how I grew up in this business. how I grew up in this business is they taught me how to have personal discussions, be personable, to notice what's in somebody's office, to notice what they care about. And I feel like what's happened over time is that, and time is the key word, there is more to do with less resources to do it, and with automation and technology and all these things. So the human being has less time in their mind to have those personal conversations. And I think the big difference now today for a seller is that they have to earn the right to be personal, to be curious, to be on the personal side. You still have to do it, but I think you earn the right by bringing something to the table that says, I have respect, knowledge, and curiosity about what you do and how you do it. I have understanding of your industry. I have understanding of you and your role based upon, your role and the persona and other companies. And I just love the way that you said that, earn the right. And then Johnny, you followed it up with trust. And that's, you earn the right and be trustworthy by bringing to the table competency that says, you know something about my business, and there's a value to go deeper with you. You have to earn the right for somebody to go deeper. It's a little different.
When you do that, you also differentiate yourself. When you go in and you've done all the homework on the company, their corporate objectives, strategic initiatives, what's driving the company, how they make money, you understand the persona, you understand the use case, and you've done all that homework, you are already differentiated
Totally
from 99% of the other sales account executives that go in there.
Yeah. I love that. How you sell.
Just fly into the meeting and they haven't done any homework.
Well, that's why we say, I love the saying that follows that up, Johnny, is how you sell today. How you sell can be just as important as what you sell. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a powerful example that you just gave. Awesome.
But if we map that back, though, to your first question that got us off on this, and I love this dialogue, was, so what have you observed around high-performing teams? One of my goals as a leader is to create a culture where we're comfortable being vulnerable. And that's really hard to do with a bunch of type A in general, hard-charging, competitive folks. Yes. Last thing you want to do is get up in front of your peers and be vulnerable. Right. But I love it, because if we are, that's the place where we train. And
that's the training that you need. And if you're prepared through that training, Eric, I'd buy in that 100%. Then you'll be way more prepared to go out and meet the customer.
Absolutely. But it's hard to get people to realize that this, inspection, this MedPick call, I call them the 360 calls. We get on these once a week and we pull up a deal. And you open up your Salesforce page and you got 2 minutes to give a mantra on what that opportunity is about. And then we're right in the MedPick tab and we're just going through it. And the sales team, the seller and the SE are leading that thing. So they're shining a lantern on their own problems. And if, our job is, I always say the disclaimer, I give it every single time. I've done it 1,000 times. I will say, our job on this call is to leave here with some pucker moments. We should have some pucker moments. If you leave here and we're slapping high fives thinking we got this, boy, we're running a perfect sales cycle, like everybody else just didn't do their job. We mailed it in. We should be able to find 10 holes in your deal without even thinking about it, because there are 10 holes in every deal. So this is our chance. Let's do this, safe place. And then let's also help you solve them. It's not just our job to poke a bunch of holes, but it's our job to help you come up with solutions to those things. And that's what I love, but you got to be vulnerable. And that's a leadership requirement, is to create that culture of vulnerability.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what one of the first things that you said is, what does success look like? And then you have to ask yourself, why does success look like that? And then you break it down to, what is it that those people do? And then how do those people do that, right? And to your point, everybody's not executing all their deals flawlessly. So what is it that they need to do that they haven't done, and how are they doing it? When they pull off that skill, is it a 8 on a scale of 10? Was it a 9? Was it a 10? What was it? And that's where the learning moments happen, when you break it down for people. Like when that person executed that, what knowledge did they need to have, and what skill set did they need to be able to execute that play, essentially?
I love that. There's a difference between learning moments and compliance moments. And I feel like when you have those meetings there, when you're getting together every week, so many inexperienced leaders, they look to establish their authority or their value to a group through compliance. And I've always found that is just such a missed opportunity, because the value comes from creating a culture of learning, creating a culture of progress, which inherently creates a culture of vulnerability. I still do it today, start off those inspection calls and talk about, hey, it's not a crime to not know the answers to these questions, because all of us will have gaps, but it's a crime punishable by death not to be doing anything about it. And so once you kind of establish that and get that out of the way, you don't get a lot of the yabba dabba do answers. And then you start getting people volunteering. They're going to want, if you're honest with yourself, you're listening to this call and you're leading, how many people actually want to volunteer an opportunity of theirs to you in front of others because they feel like they're going to get better and the opportunity is going to get unstuck, or they feel like they're going to, be an example of compliance? I mean, that's a simple question. And I bet you if you asked your team that, like, when we go through these, do you feel like we're talking about compliance? Do you feel like we're talking about learning and progress? I just think it's important. It's so critical. Vulnerability will never come. And then how do you get vulnerable? So I'm a big believer in this too, like on vulnerability. We talk about this. We want our people, we want to encourage vulnerability. Eric, let me ask you, how do you give me some examples of how you've been vulnerable in front of your people as you've led? Does anything stick out to you?
Oh, I'm laughing because I hope that anyone that's worked for me would say this. Well, anyone in the last 6-8 years, if you worked for me in my early days, you probably would answer it differently. But if you worked for me in the last 6 or 8 years, the easiest one to lay out there is, have you ever apologized to your team? I fall on the sword, I don't know, once a month-ish, for something I did that was either stupid, wrong, didn't come out the way I wanted it to do, whatever, didn't yield the right result. So, hey guys, I apologize. Like, I asked us to do this thing, and that wasn't that didn't turn out to be very effective for us, or whatever. I made a decision. We were betting on this one partner, and you know what? That was a bad bet. We're going to course correct, because for whatever reason, that isn't where we're going. I find that goes a long way. I think the other one, Cap, that I like to do is I like to go out and I'll do some of these med pick calls myself.
Bingo. Yeah.
And I'll put myself in the hot seat, and I'm going to say, look, these are things that I'm doing here. Here's the 3 spots I think are blind. And if you got more, throw them out there. And when they throw it out there, you're not jumping on them. You're acknowledging it. You're saying, that's great. Yeah, tell me more. And I think that's key, but we do that quite a bit.
Johnny, I'm going to embarrass you for a second. I love that, Eric, when you said
I've been embarrassed before by you.
Well, it's going to be a compliment, but the other times I try to embarrass you, it's not to compliment you. This one is to compliment you.
Okay.
But Blade Logic was a great example for me. When John hadn't been exposed to like force management command of the message, like it was a brand new company, they were one of the early adopters for us. And I'll never forget this, like in the most intense part of any force management training, Eric, I think you would agree, it is the role play that you're doing in front of your peers and getting great feedback. And, but talk about vulnerability, and I'll never forget this. And by the way, I think it's the only time, it's certainly the one that I remember the most. And I think this had a lot to do with Blade Logic's success. John McMahon insisted that he be the first one to do the role play. He'd never been through the methodology. He created the output of the value framework, the value drivers. And I just found that it's like the tension in that room, the stiffness in the backs of people, like when he went, and by the way, how we do it in groups, Eric, like 5 or 6 people, whatever. McMahon did it in front of the whole company. He did it in front of the whole company. And was it perfect? No. Was it freaking setting the tone for everybody? It's new for everybody, and everybody's expected to take their best swing at it. He prepared overnight like everybody else did. It's something that it's one of the things that I'll never forget. I tell the story a lot. Yeah, I tell the story a lot, and you'd be surprised, Eric. I tell it on purpose to CROs, and how many CROs will go, "Oh, that's awesome," but role play time comes and they're walking around with a clipboard. You with me? And Johnny, do you remember that? Me sitting right next to you, giving you feedback, bro?
Yeah, then we did that leadership training. I did the same thing. No, I think it's so important to go first. Because to Eric's point, nobody's flawless. So you're trying to show your team, look, I'm going to go first. We all just learned this. There's a high probability I'm going to screw it up in some way, shape, or form. But I'm going to give it the best shot that I got. And that's all I'm asking you guys to do. Nothing else.
And Eric, I remember you similar when I think we were in New Orleans somewhere, but you sat up in the front and you were like totally stuck in and helping people get unstuck and giving examples of where it worked for you and didn't work for you. And so people listening, don't ask people to do things. You want to be vulnerable? One of the ways, don't ask people to do things that you're unwilling to do yourself. That's the fastest way to lose the locker room, in my opinion.
The other thing too is like, what Eric was saying with the decisions that he made, where it's really important as a leader. If you make the wrong decision, change it quickly, and don't tie it into your ego. Don't let your ego get in the way. Just, hey, we made a mistake. It's based upon the information I had at the time. I have more information now, and I'm changing the decision because it's best for the business. It's not about me and my ego.
I like that. And getting back to what Eric said also is about, I call it getting in the pit. When he rolls up his sleeves, he does the med pick review or whatever on an account that he's working on. I always encourage people to get in the pit. And what I mean by that is, when is the last, you're asking an SDR to pick up the phone and call an executive or have you. Have you forgotten how hard that is to do? If you've forgotten how hard that is to do, sit in the pit. But you'll remember quickly how good you are at it, or you wouldn't be a first line leader. Well, you were good at it at one time. And what I love to do is when I do sales calls, I still do, at least a couple of sales calls a day, which I really love about my role of force management. But the first thing that I do is when we're done, I ask my team, give me 2 things you like about what we did, meaning me, because I was the one doing the call. Give me 2 things you liked about what we did, and give me 2 things that areas where you would do it differently, or something that caused you pause. And I got to tell you, they don't trust you at first. So like, well, there's really nothing I didn't like. They're so good. You're so awesome at this. And I'm like, that's not helping anybody. Everybody knows there's something. And then once your team understands that it's safe, I've gotten some incredible feedback. Like I've gotten feedback so good that I had to call the customer back because of something that I may have said in a way that might have not answered their question, or thought that maybe we didn't have a solution for that. I had to call somebody. I just explained to them, hey, we did a debrief after the call. My people said that when you asked this question or you objected to this, that I really didn't answer your objection. Do you mind if I spend a few minutes? And once your team sees you doing that, like talk about authenticity and vulnerability. But again, Eric, there's so many people that will listen to that advice and not do it. Why do people hesitate to be vulnerable?
I love that. Sorry to cut you off there. I love what you just said about the 2 things you thought you did really well and 2 things you do differently. I learned that from you, and I've been doing that after every sales call ever since you taught me. I don't know, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And the other thing you said was, your A players are going to immediately skip over the things they said they did that they thought they did well, and they'll jump right to the stuff they didn't do well. And you force them to say, no, wait, there were lots of good. I got a bunch of examples that you did really well. And you also have to stay in that moment and celebrate a little bit before we go beat ourselves up. But I love that.
Well, I love what you just said, because that's another way for authenticity and vulnerability, because the good ones, the good ones, you're hardest on yourself. And when you ask them, give me 2 things, and they'll start with what they didn't like. And it's a really good way of setting the tempo on authenticity. and just saying, well, hang on now. And you force them to talk about what they liked. And maybe they say, well, I wasn't really comfortable picking up the phone and talking to this, to the IT manager in front of you, but I did it anyways. I was afraid, but did it anyways. I celebrate that too, if that makes sense. But I like what you're saying. It builds another level of trust when you're talking about there's something, I guarantee you there's something in there that you should be proud of and that I'm proud of. How many people listen to this? Like, think about the last feedback you get. Did you just go right to what was wrong with the call and what sucked about it and what you need to do differently or what have you? And people aren't doing it to be mean. They're just not prepared to be thoughtful.
What I found is that, with A players, even, some really good Bs, when you come out of a sales call, you only have to ask, how do you think that went? And what I found is, to your point, a lot of people go straight to the negative. And it sounds like when you listen to them, like, wow, that was a really bad sales call. And then as the leader, you get to say, well, hold on a second. I think you're being a little hard on yourself. Maybe there's some improvement I like to just pick one thing for this one thing, and I'll help you work on it. But let me tell you, here's a bunch of things that you did incredible in that sales call. So you should be really proud of yourself. And you leave it at that. And that sticks in their mind where they know, okay, I just have to go work on this one thing. At least that's the way that I used to do it.
It seems so simple, but my gosh, like how many times we've heard people that grew up in a household or whatever where nothing was good enough or what, and then we just perpetuated as leaders. And we're talking about, didn't even acknowledge anything that was good. It's interesting. I had a phone call with somebody today and they spent 3 days with their leader. Check this out. 3 days with their leader. Their leader did 90% of the talking in the private moments that they were, outside of, and didn't really find anything out about the person that they were traveling with. And then, so that was shared with me. And I actually said to the person, I said, hey, have you thought about, because I'm careful not to say, well, what I would do, because that messes people up. They don't want to know what you would do. They want to know what they should do. But I said, have you thought about calling that individual back and say, hey, you spent 3 days with me. First of all, what were you expecting? Because there was no expectation about what was going to happen over the 3 days by that leader. So what were you expecting? And could you tell me 2 things you liked about the time that we spent together and 2 things that caused you pause? And that person was just like, I'm not sure I can do that. And I'm like, why not? I mean, I don't want to change anybody's disposition, but why not? And this is the point that if your leader doesn't establish the authenticity, there's nothing that says that you can't. Does that make sense? Because everybody's in progress. Everybody's learning. And so I'm anxious to see what happens. Hopefully the person won't get fired but I would just encourage people, you're not going to always there comes a time in your life where you are probably going to be more mature and better at certain things than the people that are leading you at certain things. And you can initiate certain things to get a better outcome. You just don't have, you don't have to lament about somebody that can't do something that they can't do. Or, you know what I'm saying? But I think people get stuck on that a lot.
Well, you just made me think of one of the big challenges that I find, particularly as we've been doing this longer and longer, and you try to get better in your role. And as a senior leader, you're trying to become more of a sort of a spiritual leader than the executor. But you got to execute. And so the details really matter. And so how do you blend that and driving vision and that spiritual leadership with the importance of execution? Love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, but one of the things that I continually try to work on is just starting with clarity of goal. Do we all know exactly what success looks like? Back to that first comment. And let's define that. But then how do I empower you? How do I empower you to go get that? And I think there are 2 keys to empowerment that I continually wrestle with. One, they're not with the definition, just in how to execute them. The first one around empowerment is, if I'm going to give you the empowerment, I've got to make sure that first you're enabled, because there's no point in empowering you to do something you don't know how to do. Like, let's enable you. And, John, I think about the tell, show, observe, feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
But the second element to that is once you've been enabled to do it, now I'm going to hold you accountable to it. And so what's that balance of the enablement, the accountability, and the expectation of, no, but you're going to do this because you're empowered to do it. And that's the expectation. So there's a high bar. But I'd love to hear your feedback on that. To me, this is a balance of everything we've been talking about. It's the softer skills, but it's the clarity of no metrics matter. And we're here to produce. And there's some fundamental stuff. I can guarantee you, if you're not making enough calls and saying enough of the right things, you're not going to succeed. But I'm not going to hold you to 50 calls a day. Like, that's not how we're managing it. So it's that balance in between. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Johnny, you go first.
Okay. Well, for me, first and foremost, I think you need to, as a leader, you need to set some standards of performance so that when people hop out of bed in the morning and their feet hit the floor, they know exactly what you expect from them. Mm-hmm. And those standards of performance, for me, could never really be more than three things. And the three things, when I actually would stand up and tell people I'm going to set some standards of performance for everyone right now, I used to see the laptops open and the pens come out and I'd say, stop. I'm going to tell you three things that you'll remember. You'll never have to, because I don't want them to think, oh, I have to go to those 10 things McMahon told me to do when they hop out of bed and they're confused. I want them to know it's just these three things. That's it. Now, and I'm going to take a little tangent here on setting standards of performance. When you set standards of performance, make sure, to Eric's last point, is that you can hold some accountability on those standards of performance. So don't start setting standards of performance where you don't know what acceptable is, unacceptable, and overperforming are, because you're going to have to reward the overperformers and you're going to have to find a way to penalize the underachievers. So if you don't set the standards of performance, if you're not ready to hold people accountable, because if you just set it and you're never going to hold people accountable and not reward the overachievers, you're going to have a different type of culture problem inside your organization. So that's first. Second, on setting standards of performance, I think you have to think about when someone achieves this one thing, then it meant that they did the other 4 or 5 things before it, because it's the only way they could get to it. So don't start setting, how many calls did you make? How many emails did you send? Those are just activities. I mean, you need to have accomplishments. What did they actually accomplish? If you get to the economic buyer, chances are you did a good discovery, you did good scoping, you got a champion, you got to the economic buyer. That could be how many economic buyer meetings did you actually have this month, right? Face-to-face, not, I think I did a Zoom call with them. No, face-to-face. You're going to see a C-level person, go see them. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I agree with Eric. If you're going to hold people accountable to standards of performance, you have to do everything in your power to train those people on what it is that you're holding them accountable to. So that's, Johnny, they used to call me like Phil Donahue and all kinds of names because I would go around with a microphone.
Oh, are we putting that list together of the names? Because I got a few.
Yeah, I'd go around with a microphone in one hand and I wore the lavalier, and I'd hand it to all the people in the audience, and I basically would ask them questions, but it was always about all the fundamentals that we already trained on. And then sometimes they couldn't answer it. And a lot of times I'd just say, how is it possible that I know all this stuff and I do chicken shit all day and you sell all day and you don't know it? And you only have to do that a couple times where they see that you know this stuff and they don't. And now they're really going to learn it. And they also know that you're coming with the microphone at the next meeting too. And they don't want to be unprepared. And it's not trying to be a hard ass. You know that these things come up in sales calls. The top 10 most common objections, how we create value, how the competition instills fear, uncertainty, and doubt in us. Those types of fundamentals that you have to know cold. So And then, only then, after you know that you've trained them as much as you possibly can, then you have to hold them accountable. But you also have to reward the overachievers, because I think when a lot of people, leaders, listen, they hear accountability, then their knees start to knock together because they think, oh, I have to go like penalize somebody or take something away from someone. Yeah, that's part of it, especially if they're not achieving. But what about the overachievers? You have to reward them also.
I love that. Eric, before I follow up, I want you to comment on what Johnny's saying.
Yeah, well, first of all, John, one of your superpowers is simplicity. So, of course, they don't have to take notes because it's so simple and consumable. And that's
Right.
just a superpower. And something I'd challenge every leader out there. Are we overthinking this, or are we breaking it down? It doesn't mean it's not a very complex topic, but the skill is to write a shorter letter. And that's not to be lost. But I love where you were with, there's an element, that accountability piece, there has to, I love the reward. So let's catch them doing something good. Very, very powerful. But there is no shadow. Like, you can't hide in the shadows. And that's also the balance. And if you can do that, as you said, going around with the microphone, if you can do that, and to your point, you're leading from the front because you're ready and you're participating, the objection handling, that's cash money. Nobody wants to be shown up by the boss on stuff that we should all be doing at work every day. Like, nobody wants that.
No, but I would also send it, just to be honest here and draw up the picture, I'd send out, you need to know this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
When you come to the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
You need to know this stuff. So there's no excuse to say, no, well, I don't know it. No. And it's stuff that I'm not trying to get people to learn stuff that they don't need. These are like fundamental things you got to know just to be in a customer conversation. What is the use case? What are the different steps in the use case? Tell me about the persona, how they're measured, all those things.
Yeah, there's a couple of great principles here we're touching on. Like, I'm going to share with you guys a story. When I wanted to fire somebody, and I know you've heard this, Eric, probably 7 times at least. When I wanted to fire somebody, I went to my boss and I said, hey, I want to fire Johnny, not Johnny. I want to fire Steve. And my boss said, why? And I told him all the reasons why I wanted to fire Steve. And my boss started laughing. And I was a little pissed off that he was laughing. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to chuckle, but I just found it kind of funny because I know somebody who does those 5 things that you told me Steve can't do. I know somebody that can do those really, really well. And I'm like, who? And he goes, you. And I'm just sitting there trying to understand the point. And I'm like, yeah, I know how to do them. And he doesn't. And that's why I want to fire him. And it was such a great learning experience because what he was really saying to me is, how is it that you're a leader and your people can't do it, but you can do it? Like, this is why I've hired you, to help your people be able to do what you do. And so then that coaching model, Eric, that you referenced, my boss went through, said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to just go through this little, exercise. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to tell Steve what's expected of him. I'm like, hey, let me tell you, I have told Steve ad nauseum what's expected of him. And my boss was like, I figured that you would, but I just want to make sure that we have to be very, very clear on what's expected. John McMahon, I'm going to tie this into another story. John McMahon telling us that we need to understand the advantages and differentiation for a new product that we had acquired called Mechanica. I'll come back to that in a second, but he was very clear on what he expected at this sales kickoff. The next thing he says is that you have to show them how to do it. You have to show them how to do it. And he said, John, where it's going to get difficult for you as you grow and grow and grow in organizations, the showing might be a combination of you and other resources, because there might be other people around you who are better at demonstrating the actual skill that needs to happen than you will be. And you have to be comfortable in your own skin delegating that. And why this model breaks down a lot of times is because when the boss isn't very good at it, he can't go through this model because he or she can't show it. Big learning point for me. Next thing he said is you have to observe it. He said, when's the last time you traveled with Steve? And I'm like, I hate traveling with Steve. This is why I want to fire him. Because the last 3 times I traveled with Steve, these were the outcomes. And he was like, that's my point. Like, but in this continuum, tell them what's expected of them, show them, observe them, and then give them feedback. So I had to learn how to give people feedback. That's where I came up with the 2 things that you like about what you did, the 2 things that you don't like. And then my next level of maturity on this was, now I have to break down all these little skill sets that I got to talk to people about and all these things they should be doing as a leader. How did I break this down to simplistic terms that would help people understand wherever I am, what should I do next? And it was a fantastic learning experience. I learned from John at PTC. Is the engagement model basically puts all these skill sets together and says, based upon how this is how I've changed it a little bit over time, but based upon how this buyer buys, this is how we're going to engage with them. In this stage, we are going to do these critical activities, and they're going to be measured this way. And we got skills and knowledge in order to do that. And when we've done that and the customer's done that, then we're going to progress and exit exit a stage and enter a new stage. And putting those 2 worlds together of all the knick-knack skills and knowledge that somebody needs, and then you got to simplify it and put it in terms of what does that look like in a game, in a stage of a game, in the play of a game. And I just think if you don't simplify it all the way down to that level, then you're just screaming at people about, well, you didn't hold your hand right, or you didn't, address the customer right. Or if you're playing football, you didn't have your feet aligned right. But in the scheme of the game, you have to not only tell them about their feet, but you have to tell them about how they're going to perform in the scheme of the game. Does that make sense to you guys? And I just think that a couple of things happen where that breaks down is that they get stuck on well, I haven't told them specifically what I expected them. When we bought Mechanica back at PTC, very complex. You had to be a doctor typically to use that stuff. You had to have a doctorate in simulation, and they're hiring some guy from Xerox to go talk to these dudes about simulation. They got a doctorate. But what John said was, this is what I expect in this sales meeting. It's a true story. This is what I expect in this sales meeting. And I'm going to walk around, and in the true story, I'm going to walk around and I'm going to call on, but there's 300 people in the room, 500 people in the room, you should expect over the course of the day that you will be called on in some form or fashion to be prepared to talk about this. Well, he did it. We were all up all night, and he did it. After about the 3rd answer, this was also very impressive. After about the 3rd answer, he got frustrated, walked back up on stage. And he said, this is when you said it, John. You said, I remember you saying it. How is it that I would know more about this product? And he went on to answer the questions pretty flawlessly in front of everybody. The leader, what I asked you to do, I'm now going to hold everybody accountable. I'm going to explain to you what I expected you to tell me. And it was really, really powerful. I learned a crap ton that day. I told Johnny, do you remember I told Johnny, it's the only time in my life in a meeting. I like to use my stature, Eric. I like to use my big belly, and use my, my voice and stuff. It was the only time I tried to disappear in a meeting. The only time I tried to turn, Eric, it's the only time I tried to turn sideways and hope that I'd get skinnier so he wouldn't call on me. But
he kept making like he was dropping something underneath the table. Kept disappearing. His head kept disappearing.
But I hope people, Eric, are listening to this and just thinking about, we've all experienced it when you've had a leader that showed up and was clear on what they expected, was clear on how they could demonstrate what it was clear on, that they had observed us doing it or not doing it and was giving us feedback, and there was accountability in the process. Like, we all love that. We all love to be in those environments. Why would you not lead that way?
Yeah, spot on. I love the story and I love the message. Spot on.
So Eric, when you look back at like different stages of your career, because you came through the ranks and now you've seen many different companies, and you've been around for a while, like a lot of us. Like, what are some of the key learnings when you think back to maybe the first time you were the VP of sales, or now you're the CRO, or when you were coming up the ranks? What are some of the key learnings that you've learned, and has your opinion on anything that you've first thought when you got into sales or sales leadership, that this is the way it is, and now you realize, wow, it's completely different?
Wow. That's a heavy one for the last 4 minutes, John.
All right. Well, you got
He's going to hold us accountable on the time. We didn't know that.
Let me channel my inner John McMahon and see if I can just simplify my answer.
Yeah, you can just even pick one or two.
I think that the overarching number one is how much people matter. My God, you get the right people, everything is so much easier. And when you have the inverse, it's harder and it's just not as fun.
There's no doubt. Well, it's like you like sports, you want to go to the championship. Coaching's important, but who'd you put on the team? 100%. A lot more important.
It's so critical. And the sidebar that we've probably all learned painfully is, and Cap, this comes back to your rule of three, but always be recruiting, because boy, if you have to suddenly pivot and just be recruiting and letting everything else sit, your life is also miserable. So great people and having a bench is just so critical. The other thing that I mentioned to it earlier, but I think probably my biggest learning as you move up and you actually have to create things yourself. And, our sales process, I could give it to either of you two gents and you go, yeah, no, I built that thing. Because in general, you did. But it's the nooks and crannies of how you execute. How do you get to the EB and get vision alignment within EB? Well, it very much depends on what your offering is. It depends on the personality and all those things that we talked about, the goals and the individual. But it's going to be different for different companies. And you got to know it. To your point, John, or Cap, about knowing your product, you've got to know the ins and outs, because you're going to win that fight in the nooks and crannies of a deal. And you only get a few moments to actually ask that really pointed question that shows domain expertise and shows you understand their pain. So you've got to execute it. It's not about spouting off a data sheet. It's about being able to know your stuff so well that you can position it just at that right moment for that one comment of impact. Because I've talked to EBs, say, why did you buy from us? Overwhelmingly, the number one answer is, I loved your team. Overwhelmingly, if there's one. But the second is they'll recite some moment in the sales cycle and they'll say, that's when I knew you were the right one for us. You were the partner. You got us. And that's often a way that you approach something and position that showed you knew your product, you understood your customer's pain, and somewhere in that came through this credibility and confidence that EB or that champion said, I'll bet my career on this one. But that happens through nooks and crannies. So I'm going to stop there, but those are probably...
I really like that. But it's also because you did your homework. It sounds like because you did so much good discovery that you really understood the customer, you understood their pains, what their motivations were. That's good, really good. Has your view of sales process or the sales strategy changed over time also?
Well, I'd say it's mature.
Have you looked at the sales process and said, well, look, at the end of the day, if we don't do this one stage or step right, nothing else matters? Is there something like that for you?
Yeah, I'd say the one thing that I've gone back and forth on in general, once I really understood the sales process, I already said probably the first 10 years of my life, of my sales career, I didn't really understand the sales process, the importance of it and the nuances. Once I think I got that, I think the one place I've gone back and forth on is, when do you show the product? And a lot of that, I think, depends on your buyer and also your product. If you got a sexy, hot as heck product, I think you should show it early and often. And if you don't, you better keep that thing away. So
yeah,
that's where we've changed a fair bit, is how do you build a champion and what's the role of the product? And I think if you have a great product, the role of the product is heavy to build a champion, because they know what they need. Let them see it, let them touch it. They'll translate very quickly to how that's going to work for them. But that doesn't work if you got a complicated thing that's not walk-up user-friendly. then you change your strategy.
Or if you're selling to multiple buyers because you need multiple buyers to buy in.
That's changed big time. The collaborative sale.
That's pretty difficult. Yeah.
That's changed. The collaborative sale, the multi-threaded nature of products and decision making. I think that's changed. That's for sure changed.
Yeah. One other quick one. I know we're winding down, but
we got time, buddy.
Yeah.
A couple more minutes. We have it.
The role of the Zoom call, the video call, has changed things. I get on it's wonderful because before pre-COVID, boy, especially in cybersecurity, you were hard pressed to get a customer to put on their video. We were using them for years internally, but to get a customer on a video was quite hard. Now it's the other way around. It's harder to get them in person. They'll jump on a Zoom, but to get them out for a coffee is an act of Congress. With all that said, also, it's very easy to just forward these invites. So before you know it, every single call, your discovery call, you're grandstanding. It's you and 8 people. And then the next follow-up call, no, just one-on-one. Hey, John, I'd like to just have a quick follow-up. Before you know it, there are 5 people on there. And that whole discovery and what's in it for you, to your point about you got to get in person, because over video in general, there are multiple people. And it's a real challenge for us. Real challenge.
You can't tell the roles of the people, right? I've always said that what I felt was like when I go into a room and there's 10, people from the customer there, I go around the room and I shake their hands and I look in their eyes, and I'm trying to figure out in that moment, why is this person here? Are they a potential champion? Are they the enemy? Are they the economic buyer? Are they somebody that was just told to be there and they're just showing up? I've always wanted to do that. And then as the meeting occurs, listen to the questions they ask, whether or not they're paying attention, who they're paying attention to who, when someone says something. And I'm trying to figure out the different roles they are. That's got to be very, very difficult on video.
Yeah, especially when they don't have the video on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, half the people don't even have the video on. So you're not only now you got 8 people and 4 of them are black screens.
Yeah. So you don't even know if they're behind it or they just turned it on and they went to go get a cup of coffee.
That's really interesting. Like,
wow.
What I found with the more technical you are, the more likely you are to, because nobody's doing more with more. Everybody's doing more with less. And also the generations that are coming up is that they believe, I think, that they can multitask, or they have to multitask. And it's not offensive to some of these generations that are coming up. It's just normal to be on calls, to be on, and I find it a lot in the technical community. And I'm not making judgments. I'm just saying that I'm empathizing with you, Eric, is that it's tougher. And what Johnny said was, reading body language, and when somebody makes a statement and seeing somebody else's eyes roll or what have you, like, it's so much easier to do that, to understand the power and influence inside of an organization, when you're face to face. But those are the things you have to try to do, remotely, and you still have to fight to get isolation with certain people. Finding a champion in a room of people and establishing that relationship that they know what you want, you know what they want, is very, very difficult to do in groups, but you still have to do it. So Eric, let me ask you a question real quick. Like, you're one of my favorite people. Number one, but you've been through our stuff like 7 times. And it's not because you didn't get it the first time. It's just you've been through other opportunities. You've been acquired. You've been in successful companies that have been acquired. And then you went to that company and said, hey, we should use these guys. And so you went through it again. But you are such a student of the game. You are so committed to excellence. You're a great leader. Tell us a little bit about the opportunity at your current company. Are you hiring? Are you like, let's give you some props back, bro, on how does somebody know if they're right for your organization? And
first, tell us, give us 2 minutes on RegScale, and then answer Johnny's question. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you. First of all, Cap, right back at you. Thank you for the compliments. Very, very kind. I hold you two in the highest regard. Huge mentors for me, and I'm blessed to have had the access to both of you and learned from you for what you've given. It's just far more than I deserve. But thank you for that. The elevator pitch very quickly is that organizations today are trying to get to new markets. It doesn't matter if you're a bank, a software company. As you sell into a market, the cyber requirements and the compliance requirements that are placed on your business are real. If you want to sell to the US government, you have to have FedRAMP authorization, period, or you can't sell. If you want to sell in Europe in a SaaS solution, you have to have ISO 27001. In the US, it's a SOC 2. If you're in the financial services, it goes on and on. That is incredibly burdensome to organizations, and it's done today, despite all the tech in 2025, it's done today in emails, lots of human power, and spreadsheets. And that is a miserable existence for everyone involved. And it's very slow. It costs a ton of money. We're a platform to automate that, to speed time to market, and to take compliance and risk management costs out of an organization. So this is not just a security play, it's a go-to-market play, and it's a massive cost savings play. And in the world of efficiency, it's also a human optimization play. So very, very interesting there. And by the way, it's a must-have. If you want to be in those markets, it's not an option. You have to do it. And nobody's just throwing bodies at it anymore. So you have to do it in a smarter way. So that's what we do. And we have the benefit of being a young company. So it's a brand new tech stack, meaning it's modern, it's agile, it can be SaaS, it can be on-prem, it scales because it's just containers. So it's a very lightweight yet extremely powerful enterprise solution. We're an upmarket offering. We're going after the largest of the large, big, complex, regulated industries. And thank you for asking. We're hiring like crazy. Basically, all go-to-market roles. We're hiring sales leaders. We're hiring sales reps. We're hiring SEs, SE leader, business development folks. So yeah, we're hiring all go-to-market, and that's a good sign. We're very fortunate. We have what we believe is the best product in a market that needs to be disrupted. It's a $50 billion market, and 45 billion of it is services. Humans pushing spreadsheets around.
Wow. So I'll just put, Johnny, you can wrap us up. But if anybody's out there listening and they want to go work for a great opportunity in a great market for great leadership, Eric's one of the best. And I hope that you take the initiative and figuring out if you want to go learn from the best and want to go excel and exceed. Eric's one of the best people on the planet to do it with. So just reach out to you on LinkedIn, Eric. What is that? Perfect. Is that good? Okay.
Perfect.
Well done,
Thank
brother.
You for that.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric Erston. Thank you, John Kaplan. Thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.